I'm Eddie Rester.
I'm Chris McAlilly. Welcome to today's episode of The Wait. We're here today with Dr. Meghan Sullivan, the Wilsey Family Professor of Philosophy and Director of the Institute of Ethics and the Common Good at the University of Notre Dame. She is a leading voice at the intersection of philosophy, virtue ethics, and artificial intelligence. Meghan, welcome to the podcast today.
It's so great to be with you guys.
It's really great to have you with us and to get to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about today. But first of all, for folks who may not know you, know your work, give us a little run up. How did you end up at Notre Dame in philosophy as a Christian Catholic? I mean, how did all that come to be?
No, it's a great question. I don't know how much time do you have?
Just if you could do that in 25 seconds, I would.
Of course. I grew up in the South. We were joking off screen before we jumped on the podcast. I got this big "Corrupt the Youth" sign behind me in my office, and if my head's blocking the Y, it looks like "Corrupt the South." And I grew up in the dirty South in Greensboro, North Carolina. And not a particularly academic family. My dad worked for this, part of the time in my childhood for this company called Replacements Limited, where like if you break a plate, like one of your wedding plates, they give you the replacement. That's we were in the plate replacement industry.
Your dad has helped us out at times, so yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. And my mom was a receptionist in a dental office. So when I went away to college at the University of Virginia. And my sophomore year of college, discovered two things simultaneously. They felt really different in my mind at the time, but now with hindsight, realize that they were intimately connected. One, I discovered how much I love philosophy. I had been kind of forced, like many college freshmen, against my will into a couple philosophy classes, just because I couldn't register for the classes on making money that I really wanted. And so took some philosophy classes and realized how much I just absolutely love these questions and love this way of thinking about the world, and showed that I was pretty good at it as well. And so had gotten very invested in that kind of study when I was early on in college. And I also came to faith early on in college, which is, we can definitely talk more about that if you guys want. But long story short, the same month at my junior year of college, I remember calling Mary and Liam Sullivan and saying, just like, heads up, I'm not going to law school. I'm going to become a professional philosopher when I grow up. And I'm being received into the Catholic Church at Easter in this like 4-hour dark, candlelit ceremony in the middle of the night. And you're welcome to come if you want. So I had two like kind of really big transformations in college. And one of the things that now as a college professor, I try to keep at the forefront of my mind is 18, 19-year-olds might seem like they're superficial, but behind the scenes, oftentimes in that phase of life, there are huge decisions being made and in an interior life developing in really profound ways. Mm-hmm. I went the end of my time at UVA, I won a Rhodes Scholarship to go up to Oxford. So I went there and studied philosophy for 2 years right out of undergrad, and had a really important time in England, and then moved back to the US and moved to the university that is most unlike Oxford in the world, which is Rutgers University, the big public state university in New Jersey, which has a absolutely fabulous philosophy department and is in the big Soprano style city of New Brunswick. And as I finished up at Rutgers, I got the tap on the shoulder from Notre Dame and came here 15 years ago, and I haven't looked back.
There you go. Wait, let me ask you, because when I think of philosophy majors in college, I think about my friend Douglas, who entered college, khakis, polo shirts, this kind of stereotypical thing, ends up majoring in philosophy, and then he ends up real crunchy, wearing Birkenstocks and things, and talking in language sometimes that I didn't understand even. And so when we think philosophy, what's a basic understanding or basic definition of what philosophy is? What does it hope to do?
What's so funny about your friend Douglas, if you had told me when I was a high school senior that I would end up a philosophy professor, I would have like begged you to kill me. Most of my students have never met a philosopher before they take my class. But when I was in high school, my best friend Jessica, her dad was actually a philosophy professor at our local UNC
UNC
campus,
Greensboro,
at
yeah.
UNC Greensboro, UNCG, and I remember as like snotty, mean high school girls, we would make fun of him so much about like nobody ever understood what Jessica's dad was talking about, and he couldn't believe he had 3 degrees from an Ivy League university, and then like wasn't making any money. And so I was very, very judgmental in high school and had this stereotype of a philosopher in my mind,
Mhm.
which is, smoke cigarettes, you wear a black beret, you're incomprehensible to the world, you're kind of apart from the world.
Apart from it, yeah.
And I really did like really had no attraction to that when I was a young person. One of the reasons why I fell in love with philosophy classes when I was a college student is realizing that those stereotypes are wrong. I had some really wonderful professors. I remember the very first philosophy class I took was called Issues of Life and Death. And we would read like Supreme Court cases and news cases where people had to make a decision about whether or not to let someone live or whether or not somebody should be killed or be allowed to die. And then we had to just argue about what the correct decision would be in that scenario. And they were all real cases. And the very first essay topic the teacher assigned is, would it be acceptable for you to kill yourself? And I remember going to the TA and thinking like, what? Like, are we allowed to talk about this? Like, am I going to get called into student life? And the TA is like, not only are you allowed to talk about this, but like you must, like you have to, if you want to get a good grade in this class, you've got to really take the readings that we've done. We've been reading like David Hume, and we've been reading articles about assisted suicide and about mental health. And he's like, I want you to create a logically compelling case for your view on this position, and then show all the objections to your view, and then me and the professor are going to decide if your reasoning is strong enough. And I just remember getting that assignment. And meanwhile, my other professors in my other classes are asking me to write just like, what did a dead person think about X? What did a dead person think about Y? And this was the first time I had a class that asked me to get my house in order, like to get my intellectual life in order. And I realized at that time, I was like, my gosh, this is like one of the most practical things you could be doing with your education compared with the other things I'm being asked to do. So I like to tell my students that the philosophy in the Western world starts with Socrates in 399 BC. He famously says that the unexamined life is not worth living, and that the most important thing any of us can do for ourselves and for our friends is learn to care for our souls. Like learn how to take care of your inner life, your mental life, your heart. And philosophical questions and reasoning is a discipline that you learn that helps you in that effort. It's not the only way you care for your soul, but it's one key exercise and ingredient. And I've always been very deeply moved by that vision. And for 2,500 years, that's been this tradition that survived the Black Plague, world wars, like all kinds of upheavals in human civilization. Is thought that one of the core tasks that we are constantly challenged to do is to get our house in order.
Yeah, one of the things that I notice is that when I look back at your CV is there are kind of these distinct moments where, I mean, I guess what I hear you saying is that philosophy is a language, a vocabulary, a series of conversations and arguments about the nature of reality and how we live within it. And for you, it seems like you moved in a practical direction. Seems like the first phase, I mean, I think looking back at your, kind of your PhD work, you were interested in time, kind of the nature of reality and how we live in time. And then you move into this conversation about human action in time that leads you, I think, to Aristotle and these conversations about the good life. I wonder kind of how you think about that. Am I kind of reading the intellectual journey that you're on correctly? Were you interested in questions of of philosophy as a way of getting to reality, and then how really it moves in a kind of practical wisdom direction, it seems.
Absolutely. It's funny. This week at Notre Dame in the mornings, we've been hosting an academic workshop for philosophers. And many of these folks I've known since I was in graduate school. I mean, I've known them for 20 years. And so they've seen me go through these transitions. And my job right now, which I think we'll get to, is pretty practical. And I actually spend most of my waking hours with people who are not college professors. So they're always like laughing of like, what happened to you? Because when I went to grad school, I did what all earnest graduate students do, which is you pick the hardest and most like niche topic. Whatever somebody in authority tells you is like the hardest topic you could possibly work on. You jump in and work on that. And like the more esoteric, the better, because when you're early on in grad school, your most fundamental drive is for people to think that you're smart. And that's the currency of grad school, is just like raw power. Like you can just do the hardest problems, the really difficult texts. And I was like, let's go when I was on my way to grad school. So it's like, what's the hardest possible topic? Like the nature of time itself. Like that's like, it doesn't even get too much more difficult than that. And actually, one of the things I learned I loved as a philosophy student that really convinced me to go to graduate school was that I liked the practical topics, but I also just loved the pure like system building and the really deep historical questions. So I was excited to work on that in grad school. My dissertation had the most like cringe title. It was called The A Theory, a Theory. The A Theory of Time, a Theory, but I even took out of time just to make it a little bit sillier. But I look back on this and like, oh my gosh, like nobody in there, I'm not even sure my dissertation advisor totally understood everything that was in that thing. It was like, it was cringe.
I get an email once a quarter with how many people have read my dissertation, how many people have pulled it electronically. I hope you don't get that email. It's very depressing.
I'm going to go look up your dissertation. I'm going to go pull it right now. What was your title, Eddie?
It was Organic Models of Church Renewal or something like that. But yeah, I'm averaging, I think, one a quarter. Probably, my wife is going to pull it just to keep me happy.
I have it on good authority that's not happening. It's not your wife.
I'm going to go get it after this. I'm going to pull it, put it on my shelf.
There you go. One of the things that, well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that as you think about your work and the practicality of it and accessibility, one of the things that I've listened to your podcast, reading some of your work, you've made these important conversations accessible. And you and I think another professor created a course, God and the Good Life at Notre Dame, and it's become the most popular course at Notre Dame. But you've worked in reading the book, the Good Life Method, at making the exploration really accessible. Why was that important to you? Because you could have just taught Philosophy 101 and made people regurgitate Socrates for the next 20 years, but you really worked to do something different.
Yeah. I had a big turning point in my thinking about what my vocation is in 2014. So I was going through the tenure process at Notre Dame, which you folks listening know. For professors, you get like 6 years, and then the university either decides to give you a contract for the rest of your life or you're fired. Like it's up or out in our system. And so it's a crucible moment for somebody who thinks that they want to be a professor. And so I was going through the tenure process, and I'm a baby. So I decided and it takes a whole year for them to make the decision. So it's a long, drawn out process. So I decided the year they were making that decision, I had a leave that was owed to me, and I'd gotten a little grant, and I decided to move to Singapore that year. And so I left South Bend and decided, how far on planet Earth can I get away well, this momentous decision is happening behind my back. And I'll just kind of regroup and think about what I want to do next, because no matter what, my life is going to change next year. And so I was down. I spent the year in Singapore. For the first time, I wasn't teaching. I loved teaching, but that was my first year off of teaching. My only year not teaching. come to think of it now. But I was down in Singapore, and I was working on a book about philosophy of time. And was fretting about my future. And I had this really strong conviction when I was down there. I was like, when I go back, I hope that I'll get to be a partner at Notre Dame. Like, I'll get to stay and I want to really throw myself into community life when that happens. Like, when they say that I'm in, I want to really like embrace that identity. And what do I want to spend all my time on now that I don't have to worry about being fired all the time? And the very strong conviction that I had when I was down there, and I can still remember like sitting, in 90-degree heat at the cafe at the university I was at, thinking, I want to finish this book, but I really want to build a different kind of philosophy class. Like, I want to spend a big part of the next phase of my work with students, which is kind of counterintuitive. Usually you get less teaching and more of other stuff when you get tenure. But I got back to campus. I got tenure. I got back to campus. And all of the tenured professors in my department were invited to a meeting with the dean, and I'd never been allowed to talk to the dean before. So all of the tenured faculty in our philosophy department went to this meeting in the dean's conference room, and the dean's like, "What should the philosophy department focus on the next 5 years?" And my colleagues all go around and they're like, "Hiring a philosopher of science, like hiring a logician." And the correct answer, by the way, if you get a meeting with the dean, you're supposed to ask for money. Like, that's the thing that you're meant to do if you're not a dummy. But of course, I'd been in Singapore and I'd never been to any meetings before with my colleagues about this. And I was brand like, the ink was still wet on my contract. And so it comes around to me, and I was like, I think we should totally rethink how we teach our intro philosophy class. And I think it should be about the good life. And I think it should be focused on what kinds of exercises can somebody do in 14 weeks to sort of care for their soul the way that all these philosophers from antiquity that we love say you should do in your life. And my colleagues give me the stink eye of like, what are you
not asking for
thinking?
money for that. Yeah.
Like, who invited her? But afterwards, the dean, he's a really, really extraordinary leader. He's now our provost. He's now my boss in another capacity. He pulled me aside and he said, "You know what? Like, that's one of the best answers I've heard to this question. And that is really like what that gets to the heart of what we're all about." He's like, "Do it. Like, I can't make you do anything anymore, but I'm telling you, as your kind of more senior colleague, like this is worth doing." And so that year, I pulled Paul Blaschko, who wrote the book with me, who was one of the grad students in our department at the time, and another one of our grad students who didn't write the book. His name's Justin. And I was like, "Hey, do you guys want to help me with this little scheme? There's no money, strong possibility of failure. It's going to take up like heaps of time." And they were all gung ho about it. And so together we spent about a year developing the concept of God and the good life. And then we launched it in fall 2016. And I think this caught a lot of people off guard, us included. There was kind of something in the air that fall. I think there was a lot of unrest and dissatisfaction, and a lot of young people especially were looking to have these conversations. Yeah, it was a big election year. There was just a lot going on at that point. And so the class took off. It took off really fast. And I started getting to know college faculty members at other schools who had noticed a kind of similar need on their campus, and we started collaborating a lot more, and it just kind of grew to take over, frankly, a big part of my life in a wonderful way. Sometimes my colleagues will look at me and they'll think like, "You used to be this big time nerd, and now you spend all your time, shouting about Plato to anybody who will listen." But I felt like teaching that class even like the third week of school, that fall 2016 semester, I had this feeling, similar feeling like when I became Catholic, like when I first started going to church, of just like, this is home. Like this is what you were meant to be doing all along. Whereas I never had that feeling in graduate school.
Looking at
Yeah,
the
one
book, the Good Life Method, one of the things that I love about it is that it and of course, I mean, I see Aristotle in the background of just orienting what it means to be human in light of the end, in light of trajectory, purpose, and then, but the other pieces that I think are picked up later as you're having conversations about information versus wisdom and technology and its role and place are just these topics of certainly purpose and the end of the human person, the end of the human life. But then I love, probably my favorite is the sense of joining together the circles of your life, the integration or coherence of a life. That I think is something that I see young people in college trying to figure out that piece. And that philosophy can be a way of life, not just more information, but it can offer you actually wisdom and formation on your journey of becoming a person of character, a person that has the kind of virtue that you would need if you're going to engage the world with wisdom, and ultimately that would lead in the direction of your own personal well-being and the flourishing of the community. How did you guys kind of orient the central claims of the class and the book in light of the good life?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you picked up on that. The joining the circles, that's the Stoic philosophers. I think it's Seneca that had that beautiful image, but this thought, like, that's the work of our life, is trying for integration, like real like integration, stable integration, rather than thinking like I'm one person when I show up at work and I'm another person when I'm a parent, another person, in my moments of rest, but the thinking like, I want to be the same complete flourishing person throughout my life. The big philosophical idea behind the course, which we spend the first week really drilling with students in the opening chapters of the book, which the book is meant for everybody, not college students. Like, it is, everybody wonders
right.
about questions. The big philosophical provocation is Aristotle. So Aristotle, if you remember your ancient Greek philosophers, you got Socrates, he starts philosophy. He gets killed by the Athenians for being too aggressive. Then his student Plato writes a bunch of texts and books and ideas. And then Plato's student Aristotle is really, the third movie is always the best. I don't think that's true, but the second sequel is really when philosophy comes into its own as a discipline that's never going to go away. Aristotle's kind of the grandfather of how to practice philosophy, and he has this incredible idea in the way he opens his class about the good life. We have all of his lecture notes. It's his most famous book. It's called The Ethics. And his second lecture, he tells his students, we conduct this examination not so that we can know what virtue is, but so that we might benefit from it. And it sounds like a simple idea, but it's actually pretty radical. He says that there's an immense difference between knowing facts about ethics and having opinions about ethical questions and just like the theoretical knowledge you have about what's good and bad. Like, we're pretty good at that. Every time you read an op-ed in the newspaper, you get a little bit more information on that. There's a world of difference between that, knowing how to define what virtue is, and being a good person, like becoming what Aristotle thinks is like a flourishing, happy person. The second thing, that's our life's work. Like that's where the focus should be. And he says, if your philosophy class is not helping you with the second thing, ditch it. Like, who honestly cares? Which is, for his teacher Plato, that would have been fighting words. Like, that's a very, very radical claim. But it's one that I think I've been deeply moved by. And so we start off the class, we say, here's a weird promise we're making to you. We think in 14 weeks you can make a little bit of progress toward human flourishing a little bit. And I know, you gotta be willing to participate. Same way, like my personal trainer says, if you go with the plan, you'll be able to do a pull-up in 3 months. But if you don't do the exercises, you're in big trouble. Aristotle says, and we say to the students, no guarantees, but we're going to point you in a direction that we want. Our biggest goal for you is at the end of this, you to feel like you are one step closer to being like an integrated, flourishing person. And we're not making this up. We're not like, my students are all looking for good life advice, and they watch a bunch of YouTube videos and they listen to podcasts and they buy supplements off the internet. Everybody's hungry for this kind of advice, but we're not making this up. This is the old stuff. Like, this is stuff that's really been tried and tested over thousands of years that we are going to introduce you to. And if you go with it, you might, along with like thousands of years of your fellow humans, find you really like it. And so the structure of the class is each week we take on a different set of prescriptions and questions about the good life. And we move from, we do the top 10 most important questions, in my humble opinion. And we start with the easiest of the 10 and we end with the hardest. The easiest one, which my colleagues also just roll their eyes about, is political disagreement. So, like, how do you navigate the fact that you think some things are true and other smart people think that they're false, and you've got to figure out how to live with them? That to some people at universities right now, that is the most difficult question any of us could face. We actually put that as, it makes the top 10, but it's number 10. And it's a great opportunity to read these Greek philosophers who had all kinds of political problems, even worse than the ones that we currently have. And then we build our way up. We talk about politics. We talk about money in the good life. We do, what are you morally responsible for and what is not your fault? We talk about work and how do you discover your life's work, love, and in particular, what responsibility do you have for cultivating and maintaining loving relationships? We talk about whether God exists and it makes sense to practice any religion. We talk about faith, and not just religious faith, but all of the leaps of faith that you're asked to take where you just honestly don't know what to do, but you've got to have this virtue of faith. Then we get to the really hard ones. What parts of your life don't require you to do anything, but just require you to become a certain kind of person? That's a very abstract idea, but one that's very, very important to the history of philosophy. And then how do you deal with the fact that everyone that you love is going to suffer and die? Like, no matter how good you are, no matter how important your work is, or how much money you have, or how much you care for the poor, or how loving you are, all of your efforts at the end of the day are going to be ultimately answered in suffering. And then finally, you get, if you're lucky, 100 years on this earth, which in the grand scheme of things is nothing. It's a flap of a butterfly's wings, and nobody will remember that you existed. And, your projects to quote the author from Ecclesiastes, they're all dust at the end.
Dust.
They're going to dust. So why bother? Like, what's your answer to this question of why you're even bothering? And then we send them home for summer vacation.
Back to mom and dad. Yeah.
That's philosophy.
Well, I think the college students that I come across are hungry and eager to have these kind of conversations. And when you put them in a room and say, what are your questions? They circle around versions of the questions that you're asking. The thing that I think is distinctive is taking them out of the world of the algorithm and the feed and the content that they may be immediately chewing on or grappling with that has been created within the last 50 years or the last 5 years or the last 5 minutes, and pushing them back to the oldest ways of having these conversations. And it seems like the shift, the way that I've been trying to kind of think about the role of institutions, whether they be educational, religious, the church, or whatever, is just the shift from thinking that what we're doing is giving people information to trying to help cultivate communities of wisdom that are old and multi-generational and multi-century, I guess. And it seems like what's fascinating to me is that there's this pivot point from just teaching this one class over and over to the classroom, to these students in the classroom. it fits into this moment within Notre Dame's strategic vision, where ethics kind of rises up to one of the strategic initiatives that you're just kind of well situated to be a part of that conversation, it seems to me. I wonder if you could talk about that journey from the one classroom and the one class into this strategic initiative that Notre Dame has made a central focus of the last several years in how to offer ethical wisdom within important conversations that we're struggling with globally.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've been in the news a lot, like much more this summer than any other point in my life, and it's all for AI, all for various like AI meetings and convenings that I'm involved in. And man, if you had told me even 3 years ago, like you're gonna get covered in the New York Times, I'd be like, oh, cool. And then you'd be like, for AI, and I'm like, what? I would have been very surprised. Um, but it does, I think, make a certain amount of sense. One of the thought experiments I give my students on the very first day of class, I've been doing this for like 5-6 years now, is imagine that Sam Altman announces this new product that you can download on your phone called the Guru app. And the deal with this AI is that it already has all your data. Sorry. It knows everything, every kind of freely available piece of information about your behavior, and every person that's like you, and all their medical data and their financial data. It knows everything. It's omniscient about your data. And you can talk to this AI and it will answer all of your questions about the good life. So you can ask it, hey, Guru app, should I become a vegan? And it'll say like, yeah, for somebody like you that lives in the United States of America and has this income and this health profile, you should no longer eat meat. Or should I stay Catholic, or should I become Methodist? It'll say like, yeah, given all of your beliefs and given like the evidence in favor of Methodism, you need to convert. So I'd say like, what if you had an app like this? Like, would you start using it? Would you turn over your deliberations about the good life to this AI? And most of my students are like, no. And I'm like, okay, but why? Like, what's missing besides the quote unquote accuracy of this? And most of them, not all of them, but most of them come to this realization. There's certain aspects of life that I want to do myself or with humans that I love. And that like the good life is a matter of doing those activities, like doing those things. Those human things are actually what I've been wanting all along. And if I start giving more and more of that away for free to companies or for small subscriptions, what left is there for me to hope for? And as we launched this ethics initiative, we talked to like this. We launched Notre Dame. Decided a couple of years ago we really want to level up in the role that we play in translating Christian ideas about ethics to the broader culture. And one of the ideas we heard loud and clear from lots of our students and parents and faculty members and friends, football fans, is that there's a lot of nervousness about how fast artificial intelligence is changing our lives and institutions. And this amount of really rapid disruption raises really profound questions about what a good life is and what the common good consists in when you have a power that no human being has ever had access to in the course of human history. And the world doesn't expect the Catholic Church to know that much about how to like build AI. Like, I don't know, good luck. I don't think we have any computer chips at all, any GPUs. But the world does expect the Christian Church and the Catholic world and the Methodist world to have a really well thought out theory about what in a human life must be protected and defended, and what we can roll with the changes on, because we have rolled with a lot of changes over 2,000 years. And so that call, that way of framing the questions with AI said, all right, well, I have a lot of experience, helping convene conversations on that. And I'm very, very passionate about helping people think about those questions. And then we realized, the past year, I feel like we've really we've really hit this moment where folks are waking up thinking it's not just that AI's in the news constantly, it's like in my life constantly. My job has changed. My kid's school is unrecognizable to me. I now use it, on my phone all the time, or I'm trying really hard not to start an account, but I don't know how much longer I can resist. And it felt like the urgency for faith communities to speed up their conversations in the last year has just been acute. And I am honestly really glad I've been able to have some of the philosophical training over the last 20 years that I've experienced, because I think that's prepared me to decide, okay, well, this is kind of a moment where these ideas are going to be practically really tested, and I care about how we come out the other side of it.
I was thinking this morning as another article popped up on my feed about AI and somebody who had left a company and they replaced them with an AI something. They renamed the position AI something because they felt like they had to do this. But also articles this morning about I'm in Dallas, Texas, and local communities fighting about AI centers going into their communities. And so it touches on so many pieces of life. And I think for me, that's what was unexpected. Sure, it's a tool on the computer. How do we use it? How do we not use it? But it's become much more about work and life and how our students learn. David Brooks wrote a great article in The Atlantic that Chris sent me, I think, last week. Yeah, great article. Apple Computers talking about, well, maybe we'll wall off AI behind a paywall, our version of AI for Apple, so that you had to pay to get to AI. So now there are digital divides that could erupt over AI. So there are so many topics. How do you begin to frame up the conversation? What's important for us as Christians to begin thinking about or talking about in this conversation?
First, the trying to frame this conversation and trying to stay focused. I always describe this to my colleagues a lot because I get to work with a bunch of folks at Notre Dame on these AI and the Good Life projects. Sometimes it's like you stuck a marshmallow in the microwave and like every 5 seconds you look and it's bigger and a different part of it's on fire and you're just trying to like get it back in control, but it's not possible because it's moving so fast and it's so hot, literally. I think the way I talk with my folks at the Institute about this is our most important goal as a university and as a research institute that's connected very closely with the Christian faith is to try to help translate the like ride or die message about human dignity to audiences that are like aware that the world of faith has something important to say about this, but do not have the attention span to really they're not going to do a master's degree in theology. They probably took no humanities courses in college. And so how do you get this message that feels really vital to be accessible and legible to folks who work in technology or who are having to make really challenging decisions around this technology and they don't have a ton of time, but they really want to tap into this insight? And so for us, our project is called Delta. We call ourselves the Delta Force sometimes when we're feeling very proud. Even though if you look at it, if you watch the video of this podcast, you'd be like, oh my gosh, the army is going to sue us. We're a bunch of nerds. But Delta is an acronym that's meant to kind of concisely capture the key point of view from the faith community about what has to be preserved and what should be the center of our focus as we do this AI transition. So Delta D, human dignity is the center of our vision of ethics. Every single human life has infinite worth, and your value and the meaning and value of your life has never for a minute depended on your ability to solve math problems quickly, your ability to write essays efficiently, or write computer code, or even, frankly, how economically productive you are. All of the things that AI is astonishingly good at and just getting better. Thank God your value and the centrality of you to ethical life has never depended on any of those things. So then the question comes up, because some people don't believe that. Some of our colleagues, and especially the folks that, frankly, that we talk to in Silicon Valley, I could tell folks that just genuinely do not believe that that's true. Like, they can't wrap their heads around somebody's life being valuable if it's not valuable because of the impact that they are having with their life.
What they produce. Yeah.
Exactly. But we say first message, which is a very strange message, but a core message to Christianity and Judaism before that is not where value comes from. So where does your value come from? In the Christian tradition, it's the fact that you are made in the image and likeness of God. But for folks who are not religious, then they're immediately like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Or like, what, isn't God productive? Can't God do math? Like, actually, what's most important about how you were made and the parts of your identity that that we now have to hold on to with both hands is the Elta. You are embodied, and your body, your embodiment, is not an accident. It's not a defect, but it's actually one of the key things that makes your life extremely meaningful, and that AI will never have. You are born vulnerable. People have different bodies. We exit this life quickly and in a vulnerable state. And these kinds of vulnerabilities and dependencies are actually not a problem that has to be fixed, but something that in our faith is actually a very beautiful part of human life, and something that we would never aspire to get out of this life. L is love. Most college classes on technology right now present to students this vision that the most important ethical questions we face with technology are all about optimization. Just how do you get the best possible outcomes from a decision involving technology? And one of the radical ideas about the faith community is this isn't about just constant optimization, but optimization to what end? We want to live in a society where people are loved and are capable of loving each other. And technology oftentimes hurts our capacity to love and care for each other. And that's like the rock bottom of ethics in the Christian tradition is relational. Like, how are you caring for your fellow human being?
Last week, I had a conversation with somebody who works at a big Fortune 100 company in the IT department, and they're having this real hard AI push right now. And he's like, what was the conversation need to be? I'm like, AI is not relational. Two humans can do things and have conversations that AI can't. Anyway, he came in struggling, and it's about this thing that, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that's somewhere the rubber really does meet the road for us.
Sure, and this is very, very different from this constantly optimized logic that's kind of frankly the default logic of the United States of America. The T and the A really quick, if you're filling out your anagram at home. T is transcendence. AI is awesome. I use AI every day. I used Claude for 3 tasks just this morning. AI is extremely good at finding the maximally relevant piece of text for a question that you put in as a prompt. It's like a relevance super engine. But one of the things that we know in our faith tradition is that our minds were not just built to try to find relevant bits of data, but they were meant to know what's ultimately true and good and beautiful. They're meant to know and comprehend things that we might not even have data about yet. They're meant to know things that are independent of our minds in human creation that we're just built to contemplate. And there are certain kinds of cognitive and intellectual activities that our embodied minds can do, loving minds can do, that this thing will never be able to do. And a generation of young people who grow up with AI all over their freaking educations and childhoods are frankly going to be needed to be reminded that there are other things they could use their web brain for than just looking up data on a piece of software. And then finally, agency, and this gets kind of big to our conversation about God and the good life. You have a free will. you have choices and a conscience, and you're responsible for how you use that. And that's a good thing. Like, you don't want to give all of your responsibility over to a piece of technology that promises for like a low $20 a month subscription fee. It'll do everything for you. And realizing where your responsibility to other humans begins and ends, and what kinds of decisions not only need humans in the loop, but a machine should never propose to make. Those are some of the really challenging ethical questions we're now facing, that we don't know what to do. Humans have never had this kind of freedom to give up their agency as they do now.
I think the thing that I hear you saying is that AI, so in light of this trajectory from thinking about the metaphysics of time to thinking about how humans act in time, leading back to some of the most ancient ways of framing that conversation in terms of the beginnings of a conversation about a way of living that philosophy kind of gives you access to. Seems like AI just, one of the things that it has done for you vocationally is been a catalyst for kind of, asking these older questions again in a new pitch, not just within a classroom, but trying to offer, I think the word you used was translating Christian ideas and for the public good. The thing that I'm interested in, the way that you and your colleagues are approaching the problem. Some people would approach it by writing a monograph. The thing that I find fascinating about you is that you're approaching it as a intellectually serious problem, but at the intersection of institutions and networks. And one of the frameworks that, or I guess one of the analogies that I found fascinating in terms of the way that you're kind of conceptualizing the problem is that in talking about the origin story of the Delta Network and kind of that framework, is that the United States in 1945 made a $2 billion scientific gamble, and that led to the atomic bomb. Right now, we're making a $1 trillion gamble on AI. So there's just no way we're going to avoid this technology. All we can do is speed up and deepen the conversations. I guess, why is it that your approach to, I guess, solving the problem, or not solving the problem, but addressing or engaging the problem is through networks and institutions, kind of large scale?
Yeah, I'm still feeling this out. Well, first thing I should say is, if history is any guide, you normally don't want philosophers advising the government, because there's a whole lot of bad examples of this. From Nostradamus to Plato got himself into a whole lot of trouble with the Athenians. Or sometimes philosophers are just so out of touch and idealistic that they actually are extreme, that they give advice that for ordinary people is not good for their way of life. I think this is a conversation we should all be having together. And I also think it'd be a huge mistake for anyone to listen to like the theorists when their advice is not matching the lived reality, especially when you got a big revolution happening like the one that we're in the middle of right now with this technology. One of the areas where I just love my job right now and feel so intellectually challenged, but also inspired, is the technology and the way the problems that it's posing, the concrete problems, are such an occasion to like rethink how our philosophy works, and are grounding to my work in a way that like just reading books by dead guys never was. So, real life example, I had the chance to visit with Anthropic's engineering team in March. And they, like some other tech companies, have been actually doing a lot of consultations with faith communities now that they realize we're in this. And if I walked into that meeting thinking, you know what, I just wish all these AI companies would stop giving their products personalities. That would just solve a lot of problems. Just hit delete on the personality aspect of their products and make them more like library card catalogs. And then a lot of these social issues that we're worried about would probably start to go away. And you go and you sit with the engineers, and they're like, actually, it's kind of complicated. So let us, and they're so intellectually humble. Like they'll sit down and explain it to you. They're like, look, these AIs, they're built on human language. Can we get emotion and personality out of the stuff of human language? Like, could we get it out of like the basic building blocks of this? And you're like, oh, that's a pretty fascinating philosophical question I haven't thought about in a while. I guess probably not. I don't know if you can get emotion and passion and personality out of our language. And they're like, and here's we want people to use this product safely. Are human users and human characters more likely to use or misuse a product that's encouraging them towards certain personality traits, or a product that feels really cold and clinical? And how is this going to shape users that use this AI all the time? And what's the best way to develop the character of the AI in consultation with human character? And you're sitting in these meetings, and these are engineers who are just like, you tell me how to train the model and I'll give it a shot. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know anymore what to tell you. This is super hard. I went back and I wrote a Substack post. I got a Substack called The Human Delta, and wrote a post being like, went to Anthropic and my mind was blown. And now I realize, oh my gosh, my like naive Monday morning quarterbacking answers to how we're going to build this thing are way too simplistic. And I got to really pay attention to what it is.
So the government doesn't end up taking you out like previous philosophers. So
we definitely don't want.
We don't want that.
No,
it'd be good for book sales. That's what Plato would tell you.
We've kept you long, and that personality question. I could spend 3 hours talking with you about that, I think, because I heard you talk about that on another podcast, and I started thinking, but because there was that preacher that let AI coach him through it. Anyway, a whole different thing. So one more final question for you, and this is kind of maybe post those questions. What's your hope? I mean, we're people of faith. Hope's our currency. And so as you think about this conversation about AI and with AI, where's the hope that you see, or what's the hope that you would tell us about?
I'll hear from folks from time to time that think, they're real doomers about artificial intelligence, and they think, my gosh, this technology is also just going to further demonstrate the complete irrelevance of Christianity and these old ways of thinking, and they kind of despair of all of that. And I wake up every morning and think, Christianity is like built for this moment. Like this is our time to shine. We got a technology that's provoking a whole lot of folks to ask these really existential questions of, what am I? Like, what is the value and meaning and destiny of my life, and what am I not? And they've got a lot of lousy options on YouTube. I watch a ton of YouTube, so I feel like an expert on YouTube. There's so many like cranks that are happy to pontificate about this technology and try to answer that question for you. And almost everybody I know, Christian or not, thinks like, I don't know, what Peter Thiel's saying about this is just not really not satisfying to me. And I think, well, Pope Leo wrote this awesome encyclical about artificial intelligence this summer, and like a whole lot of people that don't read encyclicals read that, took it to the beach and started getting in fights with their kids about it. And I think there's plenty of more of that to come, because we have just this incredible tradition that has a whole lot to say about this particular question, and you don't have to stretch to make it relevant. Like the dignity, embodiment, love, these kinds of ideas are just so relevant to the predicament that many people find themselves in. I have hope of just thinking like, we're built for this. Like, this is a chance where we're really going to show you how beautiful and cool this approach to life is, and that maybe that's going to inspire you to let it shift more than just your approach to AI, but like how, many other aspects of how you're bringing your life into into coherence. So, anyways, I'm generally a glass half full kind of person anyway. But I feel like this is it's going to be a very exciting moment because ideas that we care about and we've devoted our lives to, now feel like they're really inspiring and relevant to questions a lot of other people are dealing with.
Meghan, thanks for being with us today, and thank you for this conversation. I am curious if you would maybe point someone who wants to explore your work or the work of the Institute. Where would you point them to go next?
Sure. So ethics.nd.edu, you can find a whole lot about our institute. And then I got a Substack called The Human Delta, where you get my occasional musings and rants about artificial intelligence and Christianity and human dignity, which is so definitely, what do the kids say? Smash that subscribe button. After you subscribe to The Weight, you should subscribe to The Human Delta. And of course, check out The Good Life Method. I've got a new book I'm finishing up on the parable of the Good Samaritan and our capacity to love strangers. This has been one of my big passion projects of the last few years. So maybe I can come talk to you guys again too in like a year, and we can talk about why we all hate each other and what we can possibly do to fix that. Which is besides AI is my other passion project as a philosopher right now.
I would love to have that conversation. Thank you for taking time to be with us. And I'm so glad you're in the conversation right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys.